2, nobody is shiftier because, in fact, nobody is shiftier than the Shifty Hippo. So, guys, I got to tell you a story before we really get into all the sports fun here. I actually recorded this show yesterday. I did it yesterday morning before work, and I sent it over to Mr. Zach. And as he went to edit it, he informed me, well, Colby, you sent me 31 minutes and 54 seconds. Sure, it was great, but there's no audio. As it turns out, um, I never added myself to the studio. And then I just went through hell trying to make sure my settings were right because the headphones that I got are starting to, well, they're starting to get on the fritz a little bit. So every time that I was doing my tests, I couldn't hear myself back. And I thought something was much more wrong than actually was. So I am now doing this show for the second time over. It's been a hell of a day. Really helps that it's like 94 degrees outside, too. That's helping. Nothing's making me get through stressful times quite like this weather. So, where we start today, after me being an idiot, we're going to start with the NBA. It has become official. James Harden did, in fact, re sign with the Philadelphia 76ers, 2 years, $68 million. So, I wanted to wait until Harden actually re signed before I gave him any credit for it, because the idea that he's going to take less money in order to build the Philadelphia roster and potentially go grab an elusive championship that James Harden's never been able to really get all that close to outside of the 2011-2012 season when he was the third wheel in OKC. This is a big move because he turned down a lot of money to be able to just come back and let Philly build with more pieces. So I do want to extend that credit to James Harden. I wanted to wait till he actually re-signed because I wasn't sure that if Philadelphia was going to say, for example, only sign PJ Tucker, I didn't know if James Harden was going to just go look where else he might be able to sign. But it does turn out that he is able to re-sign with Philly there. He does make it happen. Now, I'm a little bit worried on the really his side of this deal, where he took less money to be able to allow Philadelphia to go see what they could get on the open market. Who out there in free agency, who could they acquire? And truthfully, all they really came back with was, in fact, PJ Tucker, who does make your team better. Don't get me wrong. He's a good player. He's relatively well aged at this point. I believe he's 36. But PJ Tucker, although a guy who's very gritty, he's going to get in there. He's going to be one of those annoying players, almost like a Marcus Smart for Boston, where he's always going to be trying to get in the other guy's ear. He's always going to be doing things to just piss people off on the other team. Have to say, I loved watching him in Miami. That was really cool because they don't have a whole lot of those guys. Actually, I would go as far as to say they have none of those guys. It was just PJ Tucker. So PJ Tucker does add a different element to Philadelphia that I think they did need. But this doesn't make you now a championship team. This helps. It absolutely helps, but it does not solidify you as a championship team. Nor do I think in this tough Eastern Conference that it necessarily really brings you any closer to the top. Because when I'm looking around the landscape of the Eastern Conference, Boston actually got better already this offseason. They won the East last year. They added Malcolm Brogdon. I'm not going to say a whole lot on Gallinari because honestly, I don't know that that's really anything other than a guy you can play during the regular season so Al Horford can sit on the bench a couple of times and catch his breath. I really think that's what that signing's there for, and at least you got an effective player offensively. But Malcolm Brogdon's a guy who can run your offense. He can get his own shot, and he shoots phenomenally well. You might remember a couple years back, he was a 50-40-90 guy, meaning that he shot over 50% from the field, 40 from three-point, and 90 from free throw range. So Boston got better. Miami, although has not made a move yet, they're in both trade talks with KD and with Donovan Mitchell. I have a hard time believing Miami's not going to come away with somebody this offseason. Miami's very likely going to be better than they were last year. You look around the rest of the Eastern Conference. No, I don't think Brooklyn is a threat. I mean, even if Katie and Kyrie stay there, I think it's just one season of absolute hell. And I don't think Brooklyn, from their ownership group down, I don't think anybody in that organization wants to actually put up with Katie and Kyrie for another year. I believe it was Sean Marks who actually said, I will do anything to make sure I don't have to have that year again. And he's just talking about the hell that it is to have those two guys running the team, essentially. I mean, Steve Nash got a tough first coaching gig. But around the rest of the East, even Toronto seems to always be good and always oddly ascending, even though I never understand how. I feel like they don't really add anything, mostly because they don't. But the players they have just have such a great chemistry. I just don't know where Philadelphia fits in this. I honestly, when I look at Philadelphia, I think that this is again probably a 3 or a 4 seed in the regular season, but I think there's very clearly at least two teams that are better than them. And Milwaukee, I didn't even mention Milwaukee. Milwaukee's better than them. If Milwaukee has Chris Middleton, they might have just won the championship last year and gone back to back. I see nothing that suggests to me that Philadelphia is now with PJ Tucker a real threat in the East. I think they're the fourth best team. So James Harden does do the right move, but did Philadelphia really benefit from it? I don't think they did. So as I brought up Katie and Kyrie, there has not been any movement on those two over the last week, I suppose, since I last talked to everybody. It looks like Miami is still relatively pressing to try to gather Kevin Durant. It seems like Phoenix has come off of that entirely. And I'm sure that there's other teams out there. I know Toronto was involved in a KD potential trade, but when I'm looking at what's out there, what's left, what KD will actually go to, I mean, Miami seems to be the only team that's really in the running right now, as far as I can see. And the problem is that after that Rudy Gobert trade that landed 5 first round picks and a ridiculous amount of players, even though I'm not sure that I knew many of them, we're now looking at Kevin Durant thinking, oh, yeah, this is going to be a haul. But nobody has the stuff to give up for him. So it's come down to Miami trying to patch together what they can. And you know, the Tyler Hero would have to be a part of this deal. There's no way that he's not, because the two nice young pieces that Miami really has is, in fact, Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo can't be traded to Brooklyn because they have Ben Simmons on their contract, rookie max extension deal. The rule, it's just what it is, what it is. Point of it being is Bam cannot be traded to Brooklyn. So you got to think this revolves around Tyler Hero. After that, player-wise, I mean, I don't know if they're throwing in a Kyle Lowry, a Victor Oladipo, Max Strus, or Caleb Martin, maybe even Gabe Vincent. I really have no idea where they go after Tyler Hero. I just know this centralizes around Tyler Hero. And then picks. Rumor is Miami is shopping around trying to see what they can do to acquire more picks to send Brooklyn's way. And that's currently where that trade talk is kind of at a standstill. Miami, it seems, has figured out whatever player package they're going to be sending over in the attempt anyway. I don't know what's going to happen from this point. I honestly, I don't know where KD's going to end up. I know that Miami seems like the somewhat favorite in the clubhouse, but I don't know what's going to happen here. As far as Kyrie goes, still to date, it seems the only team that's willing to take him is the Lakers. So at this point, the Lakers are just trying not to bid against themselves, which I would have told you a week ago, even, and I think I did, that the Lakers should just add as much as they can, pull the trigger, get Kyrie. What's it matter? But if they're the only team that wants him, why are you going to keep offering more, bidding against yourself? So until somebody else shows any interest, if I'm the Lakers, I'm sitting on top of, hey, Russell Westbrook, this first round pick, go ahead and give us Joe Harris and Kyrie Irving. What else are you going to do? I mean, you can try to add in more things, but if nobody else is trying to get Kyrie, then what's the point? You're just going to keep losing more items, and it has to be picks, by the way. It cannot be more players. The only reason that Joe Harris would be sent to the Lakers in this deal is so that salary caps match. That's the only reason. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense at all. But also in Laker land at this point, if they're not able to land Kyrie Irving in this trade, well, then you still have Russell Westbrook on your team. And not only has that been proven to be very ineffective on the court, but off the court now, it seems like there are problems between the organization and Russell Westbrook, LeBron and Russell Westbrook. And granted, I know that nobody's saying that, but there's a lot of body language out there that's showing you, look, the Lakers, their organization, their players, everything seems to be pretty much done with Russell Westbrook. I'm sure he could go play as pissed off as he wants next year in LA. I don't think it's good for LA. So, I mean, if nobody moves in this one, you just have a pissed off Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn and a pissed off Russell Westbrook in LA. Neither team is going to benefit from that. I can guarantee that. So I'm hoping to see a Kyrie Irving trade here sooner than later. God, can somebody just please trade for him? Like, I want it to be the Lakers, but at this point, just anybody. Because I almost wonder at this point, if they're able to ship off Kyrie, does KD maybe say, all right, we can wait a year? I could see it. Because although all the reports that have come directly from Kevin Durant suggest that Kevin Durant wants to play with Kyrie Irving. He doesn't like the way the Nets have treated him, and that's part of why he wants out. Keep in mind, his trade request came in the day after Kyrie Irving re-signed with the Nets. Maybe KD just doesn't want to play with Kyrie. He doesn't want to put up with his shit either. So at this point, I think moving Kyrie actually benefits the Nets as much as anything else that they could do this offseason. Because you're not going to get what you think you're going to get for Kevin Durant, or what you would have thought anyway that you're going to get for Kevin Durant. I think you might have a case to be able to make him stay for one more year. And even if you trade him at the end of this next year, maybe there's more teams lining up to get him. Granted, he'd be another year older. I don't know how that would pan out, but I could foresee a scenario in which maybe that happens. I just can't see one in which Kyrie is still a Brooklyn Net come beginning of this season. I really can't. Moving over to some other NBA news here. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell trade talks have been going on. Utah's been all over the summer league, letting them know, hey, right offer. Yeah, we'll give them to you. Something I heard the other day that I thought was interesting is that this could be potentially just to see if they could rob somebody blind again on just a massive amount of trade value for Donovan Mitchell. And if not, then you just say no to all of them. And then Donovan Mitchell plays with you next year. Because this isn't something where Donovan Mitchell's forcing his way out. This isn't the organization saying, hey, yeah, we're sick of Donovan Mitchell. This kind of just came up because Gobert got traded. And then when a lot of I don't want to say reporting, but a lot of opinion givers were saying that this is just to happy or to make happy Donovan Mitchell because he didn't really care for playing with Rudy Gobert. Well, at this point, Gobert's gone and they're still having him on the table, per se. That just tells me that they're looking to see if they can really drive that offer through the roof and get 2 steals in this offseason, as far as just the hauls that you get for your players. Frankly, I think that Donovan Mitchell, in his heart of hearts, doesn't want to be in Utah. And it seems that there's 3 teams that are really pressing for him, which is Miami, New York, and Dallas. Now, Dallas, it would be cool to see Donovan Mitchell and Luka Doncic playing together, but I don't see what Dallas really has to give up with Jalen Brunson leaving in the offseason. And it just doesn't seem like they have enough pieces that they would be able to ship to acquire a Donovan Mitchell. Now, Miami, on the other hand, they do have plenty of pieces, but what are they willing to part with? And also, is it enough for Utah? Because I think of an offer that could look something along the lines of Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry. You get a point guard for point guard swap in there. And Maybe you add one of their other young talents. I would not add Bam in this deal if I'm Miami. I think Bam is more valuable to you with Kyle Lowry than it would be to have neither of those two and just have Donovan Mitchell. I know that Donovan Mitchell would solve a lot of the offensive problems that they ran into, where there were times where only Jimmy was getting buckets. And I know we call him Jimmy Buckets come playoff time, but I can't imagine that without Bam or Kyle Lowry, it would be that much. I can't imagine it being better at all with Donovan Mitchell, frankly. So I can see routes that Miami can take to get there, but they cannot overspend for him. Now, a team that can, and a team that likely will, and the team that I think Donovan Mitchell will be heading to is going to be the New York Knicks. Reason being, they make bad decisions regularly. So they are going to be the kind of team that puts together this giant book sheet offer to be able to ship over to Utah in order to gain a player that just makes them relatively relevant. And when I say it that way, I want you to think about this before anybody goes freaking out. No, this makes the Knicks awesome. No, it doesn't. So what this does, it leaves your backcourt entirely defenseless. You can now got Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell. There's no defense being played there. Additionally, you're probably going to have to give up RJ Barrett in this trade. Okay. I mean, I would trade RJ Barrett for Donovan Mitchell. But then what else are you giving up? Because, and think of it this way too, even if that's really the most important player that they give up, we're now looking at a team that's Donovan Mitchell, Julius Randle, and Jalen Brunson. Championship teams are built where there needs to be a number one guy, there needs to be a number two guy. You don't always need a number three guy if you have just several great role players that are all like good fours and fives. But most teams these days need their number three player. Well, this has basically, if you put Donovan Mitchell, Julius Randle, and Jalen Brunson together, you have in Donovan Mitchell what I believe to be a two, and you have two threes. And I don't mean this by position of, say, for example, shooting guard, small forward. No, no, no. I just mean your number one guy, your number two guy, your number three guy. We're talking about a two and two threes. You know what that brings you? At best, Toronto success. So, hey, if you get the chemistry right, like Toronto, you might end up being a four seed. I doubt that's going to be the case. I would imagine that this would make them a perennial seventh or eighth seed in the East for a few years. Yes, it would make them relevant only by talking points and excitement and just, oh my God, the Knicks aren't terrible. So there are benefits to this for New York, but this doesn't make them some great team. This does not make them a championship contender. Absolutely not. This doesn't even make them an Eastern Conference contender. Makes them a borderline playoff contender. I think they could probably sneak in more years than not. That's what you're getting. And granted, like I said, I would make the move if it's RJ Barrett's the best player that's leaving in this because, frankly, Donovan Mitchell is a better player than RJ Barrett. I realize that he still has room to grow. I think Donovan Mitchell still has room to grow. I would rather have Donovan Mitchell on my roster. But I can already hear Knicks fans coming from all corners of the universe to tell me that the Knicks are about to win it all. Stop it before it happens. Just stop. No, you're not that great. You're just not. So I think that he's going to end up being a New York Knick because, again, they make terrible organizational moves, and I'm pretty confident that it's not going to just be RJ Barrett they're giving up, but about 1,000,000 picks, and they'll never be good enough to do anything without developing some picks that they don't now have. Unless free agency is incredibly kind to them, and even though a lot of people like to say, oh, no, New York, that's where everybody wants to play. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant could have done this in New York. They chose Brooklyn. They chose Brooklyn. Nobody's chosen the Knicks since well, actually, you know what? Melo chose the Knicks in 2012. It was Melo and Amari Stoudemire and aged Chauncey Billups. Yeah, they were fun. I don't know that they ever even made it to the second round. And that team would have been better than what this one would be. So good luck, Knicks. Seems that DeAndre Ayton is going to be playing with Phoenix next year. So, as I told you last week, there was an offer sheet that was matched by Phoenix from the Indiana Pacers. Phoenix did match that offer sheet, and they were able to retain the rights to DeAndre Ayton. What does that mean? Well, at first I thought it meant that they were still shopping him for Kevin Durant, trying to make a deal around that, but I don't think that's the case. It seems that Phoenix has pulled back, and if they're not looking to trade DeAndre Ayton, which it doesn't appear that they are, unless it's for Kevin Durant, then that means he's going to be on the roster next year. Here's some problems with that. DeAndre Ayton was told by the Phoenix Suns organization that they do not believe he is a max player. Now, personally, I don't think he's a max player either. But when you're a top, God, I don't want to sit here and really break down top centers, but definitely somewhere close to the top 5 range. He might be a little bit outside of it. But DeAndre Ayton, being as good as he is at the position that he plays, it's hard to tell a guy like that you're not a max player, because there are several teams out there that will tell you, yes, you are a max player and here's your contract, just to keep a good player. This kind of worked the opposite way for DeAndre Ayton, and I'm actually a little bit shocked that nobody put a higher bid in for him, because I really legitimately thought to myself, well, there it is. DeAndre Ayton's going to make his bag somewhere, and it turns out that Phoenix has shut that. But see, they told DeAndre Ayton that he's not a max player and then benched him in the last game of the playoffs in the fourth quarter under the category of internal decision. Not injury, not even coaching decision, internal decision, which to me says that they didn't want him to go out there and get hurt in the last quarter of that game because they realized they weren't going to win. And at that point, they said, well, we don't want to damage your value right now. Not for themselves to keep, but in the potential of moving him. So I don't know how that mends. Now, you have great leadership there with Chris Paul in the locker room. I do think that there is a real healing quality to that, because Chris Paul can be in the ear of the organization and the ear of DeAndre Ayton and try to do his best job of sorting things out as possible. Do I believe he can do it? Yeah. But it's really hard once a player's ego is bruised, especially a player that's as good as DeAndre Ayton, for him to just be able to accept, hey, my organization thinks less of me than everybody else, and now I'm going to have to play with them again. By the way, it was a 4-year deal that they matched. So this isn't like a, we're picking up your last year of your contract kind of thing. Restricted free agent. Contract came out, 4 years, $133 million. Phoenix matched it. He's going to be with the Phoenix Suns for that amount of time. Now, granted, obviously, if things don't work out, I'm sure he can be dealt. Like I said, he's a very good player. But that one's tough. Now, before we move to football, it's beer time. It's hot as balls in here. So, moving over to a very similar scenario, but in the NFL this time. Kyler Murray re-signs with the Arizona Cardinals, 5 years, $230 million, $160 million guaranteed. Now, with this one, Kyler sat down and negotiated with the team, did this himself, which tells you, okay, things are on good terms. But are they? The reason that I bring it up, and it's mostly to play devil's advocate against myself, because I do believe that this, for the most part, means things are good. But when a player takes everything on social media off of social media that involves him being recognized with your team, he unfollows your team. I know that sounds stupid, because 20 years ago, this stuff didn't even matter. Nobody would have cared if Kyler Murray even ever followed the Arizona Cardinals on, well, I guess 20 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot out there, but there wasn't much time ago that that would not have been a story. But he specifically unfollowed everything that they have on social media. So that tells me that there was a real issue there. There was talks that he was going to go play baseball. Keep in mind, he was going to play baseball originally. So Arizona, I think, has a thin ice scenario with, I guess, no pun intended, considering we're talking about Arizona. But I can't really see a scenario in which this isn't on the back of everybody's minds. And I do think the addition of Hollywood Brown helps. It's nice to know that your team's trying to do what they can to bring in weapons for you to utilize. But when I think of Arizona going into next season, there's a real spot here, okay? Think about this. Think about the NFC. We know the Rams are good. We know the Bucks are good. Well, Green Bay, they're not going to win 13 games again this year with Alan Lazard being their number one wideout. And then it's a bunch of kids, and I believe the ghost of Sammy Watkins is hanging out there, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's where he's at. Do we really think that that's what Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to make success with? Granted, yes, I am aware that Aaron Rodgers is a phenomenal quarterback and is able to make it work with nearly every receiver in the league. But we're talking about a lot of kids here. And I don't know that the Packers are really going to be much of a threat come playoff time. I do think they get into the playoffs because keep in mind, I'm having this discussion about the weakness of the NFC as a whole. I think Green Bay's worse. Maybe Minnesota's better. Maybe they're not. They could be. Dallas, yeah. Dallas thinks it's their year every year. It's probably their year in the NFC East again. I mean, it's the NFC East. Congrats on beating the Giants twice a year. I mean, come on. So I'm not worried about really anybody in the NFC for the most part outside of those two teams. But the Cardinals, if you remember, were 11-2 after 13 games last season and looked like the best team in football. They had just beaten the Rams on what I believe was a Monday night game. They looked great. And then there was a little bit of injury struggles with Kyler Murray and really a lot of parts of that team. And they seemed to just kind of fall off. If I'm not mistaken, they ended up being just 12-5 or something like that. Like they did not win much after starting off 11-2. And playoff time came and they were already done. So going into this year, you just got to remember that that team was what looked like the strongest team in the NFC for the majority of the season. If they can patch it out here, I think that Arizona really has a shot in the NFC because, as great as the Rams are, it is rare to see a repeat. And even though I'm sure Matt Stafford is loving this and he's going to be balling out as best he can, there's a lot of reasons why Super Bowl champions don't win back to back. The Bucks and Tom Brady, well, their team might not be as good as it was last year. And keep in mind too, Tom Brady at one point there not only retired but had plans to unretire to go to Miami. Is he really as invested in this season? Because one thing I keep hearing from everybody is this is definitely Brady's last season. By the way, I think I've given this take here before, but just in case I haven't, no, it's not. No, it's not. You can keep telling yourself it's Brady's last season, but I'll be laughing at you 40 years from now. He's going to outlive me while still playing football the entirety of his life. No, I don't think this is the end for Brady, and I actually think this is a more prone year for him to have a down year than any other season. Granted, I still am predicting them to be one of the top teams in the NFC because, well, as I just mentioned, there's not a lot going on in the NFC. The AFC West has more good teams by itself than the entirety of the NFC. Literally its entirety. I think if you took almost anybody in the NFC and put them just in the AFC West, let's just pretend they get a 5 seed, be our fifth team. I think almost everybody in the NFC comes in fifth, except the Rams, the Bucks, and potentially the Cardinals. I don't even think the Packers are better than the Raiders necessarily at this point. And I don't even know if the Raiders are the worst team in that division because they're all so good. I don't know what to do with that. That's something as we come up here getting closer to football, we're going to be having some fun, and I'll explain as I get through my last topic here. But there's going to be a lot of cool shit that we're going to do over the course of the next month. Last thing I got here is Jimmy G. So Jimmy Garoppolo has been granted permission to seek a trade with another team. I know a lot of people had been saying Seattle. It's not going to be Seattle. Seattle was totally willing to do exactly what I want them to do this year. Play Drew Lock, play Geno Smith. Who cares? Let's win 4 and get one of these kids coming out in the draft. That's what Seattle's game plan is. So who wants him? Who wants Jimmy G? I mean, there's teams that could be involved. Like I think of like a team like New Orleans who, you know, is Jameis Winston your answer? No, it's not. But do they think they're really getting better with Jimmy G? Probably not. Atlanta, you got Marcus Mariota, but you're probably not going to go out there and get a Jimmy G. The team that seems to make the most sense, and this was actually something Jimmy Pibbs brought up to me last week on Nobody Is Shiftier, but I've now heard this from other sources, not just Jimmy Pibbs' opinion. And that is that Jimmy G could be landed with the Giants. So the Giants, for whatever reason, they're doing a very strange thing with this whole Daniel Jones situation where they still, to this date, really haven't said anything in regards of, well, he's our guy, he's not our guy. They're just kind of like, yeah, it looks like he's starting week 1. They're totally playing it off. But Jimmy G does make them better. And I think they're kind of over being the bottom of the NFC East every year. The thing that I think is a little bit overstated, Jimmy did this last week when he was on here with me, is he said he thinks that makes them a 9-8 team. I don't. I think that Jimmy G in New York, at best, I'm seeing an 8-9, and I know that's only a game difference, but I'm saying that at best. I think that's more so a 7-10, maybe even 6-11 kind of year. Keep in mind a couple of things. Jimmy Garoppolo is very rarely demonstrated that he can stay healthy. And even though, yes, he has had seasons where he's been healthy, you don't know what year you're getting. You don't know if you get healthy Jimmy, unhealthy Jimmy. Yeah, sure, he's just coming off of an injury, so it should be healthy, right? I don't know. It doesn't work that way. The guy's kind of made of glass, and not anything against him. He's a very good quarterback when he plays. But here's the other problem that I see. A lot of guys are built for being able to play in today's NFL, and some guys are just really more so meant to be backups. And granted, I do think Jimmy is a top 32 quarterback in the NFL, but if you look at his stat line on any given night, he does his best when he has 3 running backs, each of which he can hand the ball off to, and he can throw it for about 20, 22 times, and he usually only gets about 206 yards. That's a good night for Jimmy. Might have 3 touchdowns in there. Just no yardage because they ran it down the field almost every time except for that 1 3rd and 6 they had. So looking back at it here, well, the Giants, yeah, Saquon Barkley, oh, that's right. He gets hurt a lot too. Now, maybe this is me showing a little bit of my ignorance and just non-watching the Giants play football over the course of the last few years because they've just been garbage. Who else is running the ball over there? I don't know. And I'm sure that there's Giants fans that are screaming at me right now, but I can tell you, I don't apologize for not knowing who your other running backs are. Maybe if they were awesome or if you were relevant, I'd care more. That's not going to be the case. So I don't see where Jimmy Garoppolo really makes the Giants a threat, even in a poor NFC. I just don't see it. The other piece to this is that means the Niners are full blown in on Trey Lance, which granted I think is the right move on their end because I think you've seen what your ceiling is with Jimmy, and I don't think you're getting back to it. The other part is you drafted this kid. You need to see if he got something or not. because otherwise you got to move off of them. And guess what next year is? A year of quarterbacks. Wow. Who would have thought you could just get rid of Jimmy and one way or another, you're going to have a quarterback going into the future. So I think that this is an opportunity here for Trey Lance to A, show that he is the guy, or B, show that he is not the guy, and San Francisco can make the move this next offseason. I think it's that easy. The other piece that I'll say on Trey Lance is I think they're going to find out that he's not the right guy. I have heard on several occasions, I heard that this guy has been complaining about arm fatigue in practice. I mean, I don't know where this source comes from, so I don't want to make an assumption that this is absolutely the case, but that's not a good sign. Quarterbacks probably should not be complaining of arm fatigue in off-season practice unless he was just saying, well, it feels kind of rusty. I get that. Outside of that, that's not a good take. So before we get out of here, there's two more things I want to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about baseball, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going to be coming up the next month or so. So baseball, I heard they had a home run derby. Did anybody give a shit? I didn't think so. So the last piece here, we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming up over the course of the next month. As I have been hearing all sorts of shows dive into their, okay, here it is, football preseason routine. We're going to go through, we're going to give you playoff predictions. We're going to give you this, we're going to give you that. Yeah. We're going to do all that cool shit here on Nobody Is Shiftier as well. But I don't know why guys do this in July. I understand that we just had what was probably the slowest month or week rather in sports throughout the course of maybe the last 5 years. I led the story with James Harden resigns. That's how I started the show today. James Harden resigns. It was planned to be that way from the get-go. So, I mean, that was the most interesting thing that I started off with today. That was my headliner. Come here where you can hear Kolb say simply, James Harden resigned. Great content, right? I still found a way to make 35 minutes out of this without having to get into all this cool stuff. But over the course of the next month here, every week, we're going to do something really cool to add up to what's going to be the football season. So we're going to do our show as we usually do it. But at the end of every show, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to have top 10 quarterbacks, or I'm thinking about extending it to 15, just because I think that there's a lot to be said between that 10 and 15 range as well. So we're going to break down the top 15 quarterbacks. We're going to give playoff predictions. We're going to give season standing predictions. And when I say season standing predictions, I don't just mean that I look at a team and go, yeah, they're definitely like a 9-8 team. No. The Shifty Hippo does not do it that way. The Shifty Hippo does the math out to make sure that everything comes out 50-50. So for every win for one team, there has to be a loss for another. We don't mess around with this unless we do it the right way. So we make sure that mathematically this is entirely correct. And when I say we, I am literally talking about myself. This is something I do every year, even before I started getting on a microphone. I did this on my own in written print. This is just something I enjoy doing. And obviously I can share it with you guys. As we get into the NFL season, we'll be talking a little bit about making some picks. That's still a little ways to come. And right before the season starts, we will go into a top 10 list, the power rankings by Kolb's, team by team, who's the top 10 coming into this season. I actually might make that one a top 32. I might break down every team on that one. I think that could be something fun. But ladies and gentlemen, with that said, oh, no. There is one more thing that I have to get to because I am incredibly, I don't know if I'm happy or disappointed. One of the great things that you guys missed yesterday when I recorded the show and nobody could hear it, I sneezed during the broadcast. I actually sneezed. I've been on a microphone for 2.5 years. I've never sneezed while doing a show. And it was in a silent show. It will never be captured. And now I'm worried. Was that my one shot? Was that my 8 mile? Was that my one opportunity? Is that the one place where I could have gotten a sneeze off on air and you would hear it? I'm actually worried now. There's a huge part of me that wonders, was that it? Do I never get this kind of joy again? Do I never get to be this unprofessional? Oh God. Yes, I do. Behind a microphone was the end of that. All right, guys. I think we're going to call it there. Clearly, I'm sick of talking. Until next time, this has been Nobody is Shifty.